So, over the past week, police forces up and down the country have been carrying out a biannual initiative known as Operation Sceptre.
Back in May, this operation saw thousands of knives taken off the streets, as well as a big push on prevention and education.
Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been working with police in Lancashire this week to see exactly what they're doing to cut down on knife crime.
If we find a weapon, then we take that off the street. That then could have prevented a murder.
Hundreds of knives surrendered by the general public. This is just one of 16 knife bins in Lancashire. The weapons here are documented and then disposed of by the police as part of a nationwide initiative dubbed Operation Sceptre.
We're trying to make sure that, obviously, knife crime reduces. Unfortunately, at the moment, there's a slight increase in knife crime nationally. Obviously, there's a risk to people's lives, people getting injured, and obviously this seems to affect people under the age of 25. A lot of kids are getting involved in this, and we just want to try and make sure that stops.
Across England and Wales this week, police forces have been intensifying their crackdown on knife crime. But this initiative isn't just about taking knives off our streets.
We will go into some of our local schools, we'll give our knife presentation. Some of the local parks will do knife sweeps. We will do some enforcement at various locations where we might do increased visibility patrols, and we just want to educate people.
It's turned such tragedy into something that now saves not just our lives but other people's.
Almost 10 years ago, Byron lost his brother, John Joe, when he became a victim to a violent knife attack. As a result, Byron recognised the importance of education around knives and launched the JJ Effect, an anti-knife crime presentation with a difference.
They've been stabbed and they've been killed, so now one of your friends is dead.
That was the main goal, to be so brutally horrible and shocking that literally it shocks the fear and puts the fear into kids so much of potentially losing a life through carrying a knife or gang activity or criminal activity that it would be set in stone and they'll always remember it.
Early prevention is a key element of Operation Sceptre, but police are also focused on tackling the issues that already exist. This week, a number of weapon sweeps have been carried out across Lancashire in an attempt to find and remove knives from the county streets.
A lot of the time we do find knives that wouldn't necessarily be solely used to commit harm, that might have been discarded in terms of just to dispose of them from a household. But we have also found knives such as zombie knives, machetes, hunting knives secreted in the area.
In the last Operation Sceptre, almost 10,000 knives were recovered. So, with knife crime still a major issue, this initiative remains as vital as ever. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Well, we're joined by police officer and host of the Protect and Serve podcast, Oliver Laurence. Good morning, Oliver. I mean, as we heard in the introduction there, these initiatives are biannual, and yet the rate in knife crime doesn't really seem to be dropping. Does that suggest that initiatives like this don't really work?
Well, no, I think what they demonstrate, Olivia, and thank you very much indeed for having me on this morning, I think what they demonstrate is the importance of these operations and the need to have them very regularly to make sure that young people, because these offence classes do seem to be affecting more youngsters, under the age of 25, to make sure that there is a deterrent out there from them carrying knives on the streets of the UK.
But Oliver, many people would say, looking at the evidence, for example, in Glasgow, the Violence Reduction Unit, they had a 62% downtick in knife crime, and that's because they clamped down hard. The threat of custodial sentences, much more robust stop and search campaigns, and joined up thinking in terms of social workers and getting people out of problem communities. So the idea that people voluntarily surrender their knives and this will go away, that's for the birds.
It's a very good point, Martin. I think what we've got to recognise here is that there is definitely a crossover here between antisocial behaviour, drug and violent serious crime on the streets of London and across the UK. And what we need there to be is a deterrent such as stop and search, which has been demonstrated to be a very unique and specific tactic in demonstrating to young people. We want them to fear that if they carry knives, there is the very real risk they will be stopped and searched. Those knives will be located and they will face the judicial system. And then obviously it's in the hands of the courts then how they punish these young people. But the education part is the most important part in this, in my view, so that we make sure these youngsters don't make the erroneous decision in carrying knives on the streets of the UK.
Stop and search is obviously a pretty controversial policy. We've been through the ringer with this over and over again. Is it your view that we should just be more robust with stop and search and stop tiptoeing around the concerns of particular communities?
I definitely agree with you, Olivia. I think we've really got to be very firm with stop and search. I think it's a tactic which works. It works time and time again. You only have to look at the results in the last Operation Sceptre to see we've got a significant problem. Over 9,500 knives seized across the UK. That is an alarming statistic. We had young Alian Andam killed in Croydon only very recently. And we don't want any more parents to have to go through the grief and trauma of losing a young child so young. So stop and search, I'm a huge favour of. It's a necessary tactic in reducing serious and violent crime across the streets of the UK. And in my opinion, could be used more effectively and more often.
Well, I think a lot of people will echo that sentiment. The problem is, of course, we're running into political problems about allegations of racism, particularly in London and places like Birmingham, where that's where the most prevalent knife crime is. But the data is the data. Facts aren't racist. When you look at the fact that black people are 4.5 times more likely to stab somebody in London and they're 3.5 more times likely to be stabbed to death, the fact that they are stop and searched 5 times more actually is just targeted policing, isn't it? It's not racist, it's offender profiling, yet it still runs into constant problems of those allegations of racism, doesn't it?
So what we've got to be very careful of, Martin, in this scenario is that we don't have our officers using unconscious bias and stopping and searching people purely on their demographic and their cohort. That's critically important. However, how we overcome that is we build relationships with the community. We have them interact with us and tell us who they know is in gangs, who are the people that are dealing drugs, who are the people that are involved in antisocial behaviour, and we direct stop and search in the right directions against the right people, and we target and focus it. But when there are spot issues in certain areas, and particularly as you mentioned London, obviously there is a need for teams like the TSG and for proactive patrols to go on, so that we do search people, and there is that fear level in people that they can't carry knives, and if they do, they'll be found with them, they'll be searched, and as I said before, will face the judicial system. It's a must if we're going to reduce this abhorrent crime on our streets.